Question, can everybody do it? Okay, the answer to that is yes, everybody can do it, but that's more theoretical than practical. Can everybody be a good pianist? Yeah, everybody in here could be a really good pianist. Some of you, probably half of you, could be a really great pianist if you worked at it hard and put in the effort. So everybody can do it, but very few people will, because it takes effort and it takes a lot of experimentation to learn to separate fact from fiction. So yes, anyone, your consciousness, if you have consciousness, you can do this. Again, should becoming operational in the non-physical be a main goal? No. Let it be a natural result, not a fundamental goal. Growing up is a fundamental goal. Doing this is a result of growing up. Okay, next. Okay, how? Okay, you start with meditation. It's the first answer to that. Meditation is a good tool. What meditation does is it enables you to become familiar with your own consciousness. I mean, if you're going to understand consciousness, start with your own, right? And your own consciousness is what you find in meditation. In chapter 23 of book 1, I have a long section on meditation. Practice, have patience, stick-to-itiveness, again, key, collect evidential data to confirm what you're doing. There are no magic pills or magic processes. Drugs are not the answer. Okay, you can get some help. Just get started, I guess. You know, the hemisync tape that you get at TMI, you know, that basically helps you meditate, puts you in a meditative state without you really learning much about meditation. But it's like training wheels on a bike. Actually, meditation itself is like training wheels on a bike. It helps you get started before you really are able to balance, but then you'll never become a good bike rider if you don't take the training wheels off. So you need to outgrow it. It's just a start, and you don't really need to do that. It is an alternative. It's a little expensive. Drugs will launch you into these larger reality systems, but that's like, you know, being shot out of a cannon. There's no control. There's no sense of what you're doing, why you're doing it, what it means. There's no interpretation. It's just an experience. And sometimes that's an awe-inspiring experience. And some people take those drugs and they say, wow, now I understand there's a larger reality. And then they stop taking drugs and they go off to study on the larger reality. In that case, it probably was a help because it opened their eyes. But if they continue, then all they're doing is having experiences. They're not growing. Taking drugs does not raise the quality of your consciousness. It just blasts you into another reality system, and then you crash afterwards. You know, my book, I say it's like Bozo the Clown getting launched out of the cannon, right? Except there's no net, and there's no applause, there's no pay. So it's not a good thing to do. It's very generally non-productive. Now, what about shaman and other native cultures that use drugs? Well, they can use those drugs to an effect where they produce these altered states. Generally, it's carefully controlled. Generally, they just don't pass it around. Everybody in the village, you know, gets high. That's not the thing. It's a very controlled thing. They have their rituals. People train for it. You know, it's not just a bunch of people getting high. They work with those drugs, but the drugs are still very limiting. In their sense, they're more carefully used and carefully applied, and training is applied to it, but still, it's very limiting. Yes, there's certain things you can do there, but so much better just to learn how to do it rather than have to get blasted out of a cannon. You know, that's the wrong way to approach it. So even if you can use it in some instances, it's not a good path to take. And it's very problematical, and it only gets you so far. It doesn't set you free. It just blasts you into a reality, and then it crashes you afterwards. There's not a whole lot you can do with it while you're there because you don't really understand it. It's not yours. You didn't own it. You didn't earn it. So it just doesn't compute. It'd be like taking a third grader, you know, and putting them in a math class in high school. Well, you know, you can put them there. You can physically get them and like blast them out of the cannon and sit them in the seat, but they're not going to learn much because they just don't understand what's going on. And that's kind of the way it is with most drug experiences. You get the experience, you find out that the reality is big, but you know, you get there and you get to watch the math class and you find that there's a lot of letters and numbers involved that you didn't know, you know, but so what good is that? You know, it doesn't give you anything productive. Next. Okay. Again, like we said, the approach to this exercises we did, the approach was critical. If your mind was jabbering, if you were trying to do it, if you had all these thoughts coming in and you couldn't get your mind to settle and just focus and be 100% focused on this, then of course you didn't do very well because your mind was not controlled. It was just wild. It's getting rid of all that wild energy is the problem. So attitude, basically, fear nothing, hope for nothing. Okay? No expectations, no thinking, no analysis, no judgments. If you start down this path and you start saying, gee, was that real? Did that make sense? And you start judging it and analyzing it, you're never going to get anywhere. That interrupts it. If you start meditating and you meditate once and then you start judging and say, well, gee, was that a good one? Did I really meditate? You're shooting yourself in the foot. Don't do that. Just go through your exercise. Do it. No expectations. Experience it. Do it again. Do it again. 3 months later, you've been doing this twice a day, every day for 3 months. Now you've earned a right to say, what am I doing? Is it having any effect? After the first day or the first week, you don't know enough to judge it. Judging it then is judging it on no basis. It's judging it on basis of belief, what you think you should be doing, what you think should be happening. Did you repeat somebody else's experience? Did it happen to you like it happened to the guy in the book? All of that's counterproductive. All right. Eliminate beliefs. That's the big thing. It's beliefs and fear are the big things that hold you back. Don't compare. When you have a state, and then the next time you meditate is different, and the next time it's different. Don't make comparisons right away. After a couple of months, after lots of experimentation, then you have to eventually become judgmental. You have to eventually say, is this real? What am I doing here? Is it doing me any good? But you can't make those judgments early on. Okay. Can't emphasize this enough. You'll never really know whether what you're doing is real unless you set up evidential situations and check it and keep track of your statistics. That's the only way you can do that. Okay, next. Typical experiences. I told you that I didn't really like this out of body because it makes body kind of at the center. I would prefer to change it to an from an obi, but that's unfortunately an out of mind experience. And that has other connotations that don't help. So we can't say out of mind experience. It's politically incorrect and just won't take you too far. But really, that's it. It's the mind, not the body, is the launching point. Remember that. It doesn't need, you can do this thing with you, relax your body and do all this because that helps you forget about the physical. But you don't really need all that. All you need is to focus your intent. That's part of what we did with these exercises, just to let you know that it is not a real involved process. And you can get into rituals, and it can take you 20 minutes, to get in the right altered state. But it doesn't need to take you more than 2 seconds to get into that state. That meditation is the training wheels. Eventually, let that 20-minute ritual go. Just go there, come back, test it, evidence, work on it. You don't get trapped into your beliefs and into your rituals. Okay, people have lucid dreams, night dreams, daydreams, precognitive dreams. There's a lot of dreaming because that dream reality is another reality frame. Remote viewing, we did that. That's where you project your senses or your vision someplace else. All you're doing in that remote viewing is tying into these databases. You're saying, all right, what's going on over there? Well, remember, everything after the last delta t is in the database, right? And that's only a billionth of a billionth a second from now, So the database, when I say the historical database, history starts, the next delta t becomes history. So that's a pretty current database. And you can get into that database and see what's going on there, and that's what the remote viewing does. And the remote viewers, in order to just prevent the problems that some of you had today, which is trying to second guess and judging and doing other things, what they do is they do double and triple blind. So somebody has a target for them to remote view. and that somebody writes that target down and puts it in an envelope. And that envelope is given to somebody else who takes the envelope into the remote viewer and never opens it. Says, there's something in this envelope and you're supposed to go remote view it. What that does is keep the remote viewer can do just as well. You know, it's a unique address. I want to go to see what's in the envelope. There's only one thing in the envelope, it's a unique address. He can go do that. He doesn't have to know what it is. He doesn't want to know what it is, because if he knows what it is, he'll start guessing. What should that look like? You know, what is that going to be? Oh, let's see, is that in the jungle? There should be a lot of trees and things. You know, suddenly he's growing trees in his mind because that's what he's expecting. So you get all these expectations and beliefs around it, and it totally ruins their ability to work. But again, that's sort of like training wheels. So you have that protocol to prevent you from getting in your own way. And most remote viewers have these protocols where they have no idea at all what they're supposed to find, you know, what it could be. It could be anything. So how can they guess? You know, it could be anything. And then they don't guess because it's not rational. You give them a little hint, and then they start writing all over it with their imagination rather than just accepting what comes. So that's remote viewing. You can work on yourself. You can heal yourself. You can heal others. Again, you have to be careful about not running over somebody else's free will. You can visit these other reality frames. You can go to other places in this reality and in other frames. You can communicate with non-physical beings. The larger reality is teeming with life forms. You can interact with those. You can go to these other physical frames. In those physical frames, you have two choices. You can interact with the beings there as a voice, which basically sounds like their intuition. You know, it's a voice they hear in their head. Or you can actually take on a body there and interact with them as one of them. It works either way. Again, it's just your intent, it's focus, it's data. You're not making a body. You're creating the data that represents your image. They're interpreting it based on their own experience. So that's how that works. And of course, if you can go do that there, they can come do that here. So that's a two-way street. You can access the probable future database and see what's probable to come. You can affect that probability, raise it and lower it. But your access to doing all this stuff is going to be dependent on what you're doing with it. If what you're trying to do is manipulate reality for your own benefit, access denied. You're not going to get very far. You'll get a beep, no, access denied. Can't open that folder. Again, this is a system. The system is focused on its own survival, which means its own entropy reduction. It's focused on your success in reducing your entropy. And if you're going to do something that's actually going to increase your entropy because you're going to, you know, you're going to use this to take advantage of somebody or to, you know, whatever, the system's not going to let you do that. Now, you can force it at a low level, yes. You can force that kind of stuff. There is such thing as, you know, nasty people who use the non-physical to do nasty things. You know, they're, you know, the voodoo and all the rest of that kind of stuff. That's real stuff. You know, people can be hateful with it, but you're not going to get around and run around those databases if your intent is not positive and isn't what you're planning to do isn't going to help yourself or the rest of the system. And it's really not just about you. It's about you and the whole system. So you and everybody else that's affected all go into the assessment, and if that doesn't come out to be a plus up, which means a lower entropy for the system, it's not going to last or it's not going to be accessible to you. A low entropy consciousness can easily access all of the above with effort, but none of it is necessary to evolve the quality of their consciousness. I keep saying that, but that's an important point. You don't have to do this to grow up. It's available, but you don't have to do it. Next one. Okay. Primary constraints, fear, belief, and experience. Those are the big ones. What you find there is strongly limited by you, okay? People make the mistake that the non-physical is just some kind of Twilight Zone-ish, you know, copy of the physical. That's because their habits of thinking are still physical habits of thinking, so they kind of expect it's sort of like here, but just a little different. It's not like that. It's not just a funny version of PMR with different stuff in it. They tend to extrapolate PMR into NPMR. That's the person that goes to the park. You know, we're talking about it in their mind, and they see themselves in a park. Well, that's taking PMR and that's taking this physical reality, extrapolating into the non-physical. We do that all the time. Okay, the non-physical is not experienced through your senses. You know, you don't see, hear, feel, and touch there. You just interpret data that seems like that. That's your best interpretation. How do you interpret the data? It's pattern matching. You get some experience. What's the closest pattern that experience comes to you? And that pattern may be a feeling pattern, maybe a touching, a sensory pattern. It might be you know, an audio pattern. It might be a visual pattern. Whatever the gestalt of that experience is, you kind of do your best pattern match to it, and then that's what you say you saw or heard or felt. It's that pattern match based on your own experience. Well, if your experience base is very, very tiny, you never left the small village in which you were born, there's, you know, you're not going to interpret much of it very correctly. So the more experience you get, the better you are at interpreting what you get. So your metaphors that are your interpretation get more and more accurate with experience. In the beginning, you know, it all kind of comes down to just what's in your experience base until you build that up. So that's the inexperience constraint. The belief problem is that beliefs limit you because you only interpret things within the bounds of what you think exist or they're real. So if you have ideas that limit what you think can exist or what are real, you're not going to find anything that goes outside of those limits. You know, if the only thing you can imagine is this subset, you'll never get anything more than that. Because anything that you get, you'll interpret to be that. Your interpretation is, you know, in terms of what you know, what you believe. So, you know, if you are, for instance, you know, these interpretations change so much. If you are in the non-physical and you see, let's say, an entity that seems to have a lot of power, and you may interpret that as a being of light or any different way, and you see this entity and they're doing something that's helping large numbers of other people, then if you're very religious, you just saw Jesus or you saw Moses or you saw Muhammad or somebody. If you're not, maybe you just saw a guru or a teacher. Or if you mistook the whole thing and thought he was molesting all those people instead of helping them, you just saw a monster, you know. It depends on what you believe and how you see things. You can interpret it. So what does that mean? That means that the people that go out and have these experiences and come back and report and write the books, most of it's their interpretation based on them and what they saw. Don't take the detail seriously. But it's from a real experience. If they're having real experience, the experience is real. So look for the big picture things, not for the details. But in our culture, we only pay attention to details. You know, we generally don't pay much attention to the gestalt, to the big picture. We want to know the details. You know, what did it look like? Did it have two heads? What color was it? All those sorts of things. And that's really not important. The same goes in a dream reality. You know, if people are going to analyze dreams, they don't say, you know, what color shoes were you wearing? You know, that's not important. What's important is relationship, connection, ideas. You got to look at the big picture. So when you go and do this, don't come back and you know, swear that exactly what you saw is what happened. What you saw is the nearest pattern match to your experience. That's the best that you can say. Okay, communications are telepathic. Basically, telepathic means it comes in one lump. You just get the information. Boom. A whole paragraph at a time. Maybe a whole chapter at a time. Occasionally a whole book at a time. That's usually too much. So you get a paragraph at a time. We get linear things, you know, words at a time. That's not how it comes in. And it also comes in when it's telepathic. It is conceptual. It's not detailed. You get a conceptual description, not a physical description. This is not physical. What's a conceptual description? Well, let's just look at this room. What's the conceptual description of this room? You know, basically it's a large place where people interact and have meetings and pass information back and forth. It's got room for people to exist while they're listening comfortably, and it's that kind of thing. Well, what's a detailed description? The detailed description, it's a rug, it's got this color, it's got this pattern, you got the wall, and that certain color and pattern. You got 27 chairs, 12 tables, coffee in the back. All that is the description of it. That's what we judge accuracy on. If you can't give the description of the detail, then you're not really there. Then it's kind of fake, because that's how we judge correctness, is basically on that what we call the objective detail. But that objective detail is really subjective. But what you get in a telepathic is the content, the meaning, the significance of it. The significance of this room is more the function and the ambience, not the number of chairs or the color of the rug. So that's what you tend to pick up. Significance, meaning, content, not the details. But we bring it back, and now we have to describe it to somebody. How do we describe it? Well, we make up stuff. We make up details that fit the feeling and the sense of the message. So when you read the stuff that other people have gone and they've seen these things, look for the content. Look for the big picture thing that's going on there. Don't look at the words. We don't care about the color of the monster, how many heads he had. That it's a monster is maybe important. The rest of it he made up. All right, metaphor and symbol. That's all we have to work with. We can't help that. Okay, because you're launching your exploration from the physical reality, you have to interpret it in terms of what's basically in your consciousness, and then the experience that you've had in this physical reality. So basically, you have to interpret it with your brain, with that part that represents your experience here. That's what we have to. Pattern matching, I said that. Okay, let's go to the next one. We've done all that. This is still your influence, what you influence with. You create your own reality through your personal interpretation. We've already talked about that. Your consciousness defines your reality. The inside data or the outside data, we call that objective. As far as your consciousness goes, it's all the same. It doesn't make any difference inside whether you made it up or whether you got it from outside of you, right? You can't tell the difference until you start to learn to differentiate between them. You can eventually tell the difference because of experiment, and you've been there and you know that this works and the other doesn't, but initially you can't, and if you obsess over that you can't initially, that'll block your way of learning how to do it. So initially, don't expect to be able to tell the difference. You just have to do the experiments. You experience the junk in your mind as reality. I'll take some of these from Bob's book. He was out of body once, and he came back, and he ran into a big wall. I was in Journeys Out of the Body, and he couldn't get back. Well, what was that big wall? That big wall was his fear. That was his fear of not being able to come back. He had that niggling fear. What happens if I get out here and don't get back? Well, there was the wall. That's the fear. That's what you find in these realities. You find what you are, what's inside of you. He was at a reality and found a portal. It was like a hole that he could go through. And he wasn't quite sure whether he should go through that. He had intrepidation, so he stuck his hand in it. And what happened? He got a big hook in his hand, like he'd been caught like a fish. Well, that was his fear again. Okay? That was his intrepidation of going through that hole, that something was going to get him, so he stuck his hand through and something got him, sure enough. All right. People who are, the near-death experiences, something. They're always going through tunnels, motion, flying. You do that because you have a belief that you have to move to get someplace. It's just our habit. You don't have to move to get any place. It's just data in your head. There's nothing physical to move. Move is changing place. In a non-physical data system, there is no place. There is no space. There is no place to move to. It's just all what you're focused on. But you have to go through these tunnels, and you have to fly, and you have to do that. Otherwise, you just can't imagine that you could get there. So how could you possibly get someplace if you didn't travel? So you create this travel to meet that belief that you have. Now, these are core beliefs. This is not intellectual beliefs. This is core cultural beliefs that you have. The white light, you know, the great source and that sort of stuff. All that's metaphor. The silver cord. If you go back to the early books about out-of-body, when it was called astral projection, Muldoon and Carrington, Fox, and a few others that wrote books at that time, everybody who went out of body had a silver cord attached to the middle of their back. And then that cord, that cord would pull them back, or that's how they'd come back. Well, what was it? We don't have silver cords anymore. You know, what happened to the silver cords? Well, the silver cord was an artifact of the belief that the body was primary, fundamental, and the out-of-body state was a derivative of the body. So it was again, this was out of body. It's like the source was the body, and then it left the body. Well, then it had to be attached to the body. It's like the diver going down. You know, the diver has to be attached to the home base. He's got to have an air pipe going down there, otherwise he can't make it. The silver cord was his air hose. That was his safety net, his way to get back, and it satisfied his belief that out-of-body state was a projection out of the physical, rather than that was fundamental and the physical was virtual. You see, then you don't need a cord. The cord's irrelevant, so it goes away. But everybody had cords. You know, it wasn't just this one guy that had that belief. Everybody had cords because he wrote a book and he described his cords, and after that everybody else had to have a cord too. You know, expectations, right? Specific beings, angels, saints, relatives, all this sort of stuff. If the non-physical system is trying to teach you something and trying to get a message across to you, it will appear in any way that it can to get through to you. If that's in the form of a religious figure, your mother, your father, if it's any other kind of thing, that's what will appear to you. So when these kind of various figures appear, that's because that's how they can get through. That's how they can connect to you. You get that energy, and they give you that energy in that form, so that's how you interpret it. Other times, you get a connection that's similar to Uncle Fred, so you just interpret it as Uncle Fred. It can work either way. It's all metaphors and symbols. Well, maybe I shouldn't tell you that. I'll tell you anyway. I'll tell you anyway. You know, you have the stories of the people when they, the NDE experiences and the past life regression experiences where they experience their death and then their transition. And they're always met by family and friends, and there's a big reunion, and they all live happily ever after and so on. You know, it's not like that. That's a happy picture, but it's not like that. Basically, once you leave this reality frame, it's just like waking up from a dream. It fades, and it fades quickly. Okay? Now imagine this. You've had 10,000 lives. You've had 10,000 wives. You've had 50,000 children. They've all been dear to your heart, and you're still meeting every one of them, and you can see it just boggles the imagination. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. So basically, you don't have all these connections. Now, it's hard to believe, You're a mother and you love your child and you think, that's going to go on forever, right? And love is forever. But the love is, the learning is, the connection is, but the body isn't. So you're not going to be there. So who are these people that are coming to visit? Who are these relatives that are coming? Well, these relatives are the same kind of people that are in those historical databases. They're models. They're not people with free will. They're models playing a part. And why do they play that part? They're playing that part because this is a transition. People need to be assured. People need to not be freaked out. People need to feel comfortable. It's a big transition going from one reality frame to another. And the consciousness takes a little while to get used to that, and meeting relatives and that kind of thing and all the grand reunions is part of the process. There is a whole system set up to do this. There's a whole reality frame just dedicated to making transitions work. There's a lot of people employed there. It's a job. It's like running Disneyland. It's a job, and they have people who specialize in transitions that do this sort of thing. So that's part of the way the larger consciousness system helps you evolve. That's part of it. So, you know, that's a bubble that most people don't want to be busted, because that's kind of a pretty picture. But it is nice. It serves its purpose, and it makes its emotional contact, and it does appear to happen, but it's not just the way they think. When this reality's gone, it starts to fade, and you go on and do other things. You're not stuck here. You know, you go see Uncle Fred. He died 30 years ago, you know, and there he is still wearing that same suit. You know, he hadn't changed clothes for 30 years. He's still there. And you see him in those clothes. You know, you notice when you go out, I don't know how many of you go out and meet people and have friends, you know, that are non-physical, but you notice they're always wearing Western clothes, you know, just like you do. And the ones that you don't know, what are they wearing? If you don't know these people, they just kind of show up. Well, you don't know how to dress them because you don't really know where they came from. You put a robe on them. They're all dressed in robes. So robes are very popular in NPMR. We don't like naked data beings, you know? So it's our culture. We dress them up. We can't have them standing there bare naked. That wouldn't be nice, would it? So we dress them up, and if we can't put clothes on them, like we know what Uncle Fred was wearing when he died, you know, about that time period, you know, maybe in the 30s or the 20s or something, we kind of know what we would expect, you know, the big wide tie and the suspenders and whatever, and there he is, that's what he's wearing. Still wearing that after all these years. And, you know, the people we don't know are wearing robes because we have to dress them up and we don't know how to, so we stick a robe on them. And depending on our sense at the time, we maybe give them different colored robes, and we may even assign meaning to the color or whatever, but that's just us filling in the gaps to make it the closest approximation to our data. Okay, so that's the way it works. Sorry, I shouldn't have told you that, should I? Okay, where are we down here? You experienced the junk in your mind, silver cord, your angels, all that sort of stuff. What's the solution? You got to get rid of the junk. Get rid of the ego, get rid of the fear, get rid of the beliefs. If you don't have a belief that humanoid figure, yeah, that's another one. All the good guys are humanoids. They all look like us. All the monsters are really grotesque and ugly, you know, and have all kinds of deformed things. You know, that's just the way it is because the good guys look like us. You got to get rid of that stuff. Otherwise, you'll constantly get it, and you'll never know what you're doing. You know, you're getting metaphors, you're getting symbols. And if those symbols are representing symbols of your fear, well, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a wall that won't let you come back because that's a symbol of your fear. That's what you'll run into. In the non-physical realities, let's say the OS part, you can manifest things with your mind there. So if you're out in that out-of-body state and you decide that what you'd really like to have is a cherry vanilla ice cream cone, poof, there it is. Doesn't work like here. You can do that there, and you can lick it, and it'll taste delicious. That's just the way that works. What you think is what you get in that reality frame. It doesn't have this rule set. The rule set there, you can do that. It doesn't work here. You know, as much as you try, it just doesn't work. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So no expectation, be detached, get rid of the junk. Okay, here's a way to explore the reality. Imagine this. Take a blind man. He's abducted out of the mountains of Appalachia and dropped in the middle of Times Square in New York City. He's blind. Nobody will help him. There are no social services. He's on his own. What is he going to do? He's blind. You know, he doesn't know where he is. He's on a sidewalk. Well, the best thing for him to do is take a step, see what happens, right? Nothing happens, take another step, see what happens. He can hear noises, he can hear sounds, there's traffic, there's people, but nobody interferes with him. He's got a problem, right? He's in a dangerous place, but he just has to find his reality. The way you do that is you take a step, then you go back to where you were in the first place. Okay, that's still the same. You know, you reach out, oh, here's a pole. Now that pole is here, you know, not here. So you learn that, and you go back and forth. And just through trial and error, you find out what's what. Okay, you find out what's what. Okay, now basically, you have to explore, experiment, get your interpretation. You know, his first interpretation, his first impression in New York City is that it's a wall with a lot of noise, right? Because you know how those buildings are, they're all connected, and they go for a whole block. So he says, well, there's nothing in New York but this big wall and a lot of noise. But he will eventually learn how to interpret that differently. That's his interpretation now, a noisy wall. Eventually he can, after years, if he works on it, he can be getting on a subway arriving, he can have a job, he can do all sorts of things and become functional. But that's the same way that you have to get around in the larger reality. You're a blind man, limited with your beliefs and interpretations. And at first you may think it's nothing but a noisy wall, but that's just because that's all you can interpret at the first time. You have to keep going, you have to do experiments, just like that. Okay, next. Okay, what about these other influences? Guides. You know, we all talk about guides. Does everybody have guides? No, not necessarily. Can everybody get them? Yeah. Guides are another metaphor. Okay, a guide is also a metaphor.